Good evening, and welcome to another edition of African Americans Ain't Africans, the talk show that proves without a shadow of a doubt that the so called African American didn't find their way to America in the trunk of a ship. I'm your host, the Indigenous One. Tonight, I just want to share a little something with you because the last couple of nights, people have been interested in, well, how do I find my family? I'm coming in at a roadblock. Something's not clicking. And you got to remember one thing about your people back then, as is now. Everybody's living a life. They're doing things. They have ethics, they have morals, they have values. And those values rise them up and make them things. Unfortunately, since we moved away from these people and we moved away to these cities and we started doing what other people do, we lost those core values that we once had. We moved to cities and we come pop lockers and all kind of nonsense. So so the brother that was calling asking, about finding your family and stuff. One of the this is only one teeny bit of some things that you can do to find out what your people did. What did they do? What part of the country did they live in? Did they live in a place that produced tobacco? Did they live in a place that produced coal, copper, whatever? Just find out, where your people were from and what they did. And one of the ways you can do that is by checking out these little markers that are around a whole bunch of cities. It could have been your people who helped erect these markers. But when you look at these markers, they have names of people who lived in certain places and did certain things. Your people could have been connected to those people in some kind of way, went to those people's churches, all kind of things. This is just one teeny bit of information that you could use to might find your people, depending on what your people did. You know, so this was a marker. This brother from South Carolina. So he said he's looking for his folks, and this is the example I'm giving him. If you look at, and this is especially in the South, in a whole bunch of areas where our people are from, whole bunch of areas. And I just want to share with you these brothers on this marker. Now, this is talking about a cemetery where some prominent people were buried. I'm not saying to go and worship or do none of that. I just want to show you what these people did and the next guest that comes on is going to show you those pillars on how those people were able to get things done, what they did, what they thought, what they believed in. So we're just gonna go over this marker real quick. Then I'm gonna bring in our guest and just, this is just a way to show you how these are ways that you can use to find what were your people doing. Was your grandmother the best chocolate chip cookie maker at whatever Baptist church? I don't know. Who was her clients? Who were the people that helped her? Those could have been your people or you. I don't know. So this is just one example of how it's done. So check this out. Among the prominent persons buried here are Reverend Isaac Brockerton, the founding pastor of Macedonia Baptist Church, Edmund Dees, prominent Darlington County politician, and Lawrence Reese, a self-taught designer, master craftsman, and designed several houses on West Broad Street. This is a National Register of Historic Places in 2005. Now, all I'm saying is that your people could have knew these people, been related to them, been business consultants or partners or whatever to these people. That could have been your great grandmama, your great grandfather. I don't know. But when you're trying to find your folks, just pinpoint the counties and stuff that they come from, and you probably have a little bit more success. So that's what I want to share with you tonight. Now, Today is the 4th of July. So a lot of people, celebrate the 4th of July, but today was kind of a, a ominous day. It didn't seem like that. All that festive stuff wasn't in the air. Well, a lot of us don't celebrate because I don't get into the holidays because those holidays really have nothing to do with us. They're for other people to feel comfortable while they're on your land. They're on your lakes and rivers, riding up and down on the lakes and rivers. You know, that's how they celebrate on top of you. The song, the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, they blowing you up. They're trying to destroy what you had built. So bring on the brother now. The men that I just introduced in this, they live by certain ethics, certain principles, certain ways. And that's how they got down. And when I look out over the horizon, as us as a whole people, especially what's going on in the world and all this negativity aimed at us, a lot of this stuff we do ourselves to ourselves. This brother's going to share with you some of the things that we used to do when we weren't in that democratic thinking, because that's how why a lot of us are twisted with these Negroes who call themselves Democrats. Dude, that's the Ku Klux Klan, homie. You you don't get it. I mean, stuff like that, and we're arrogant about it, arrogant in our ignorance. So, without any further ado, I want to bring this brother on, and this brother's father, he'll tell you about it too. This brother's father is the cat who started Tuskegee University. Check out this story. Patrick, how you doing tonight, brother?
Hey, what's going on, Terry? Glad to be on the show again.
Man, thank you. Hey, thank you
Yes.
for being with us, dude. Um, I called you about the four pillars that you were telling me about one time, and I just wanted you to run through that again.
Yeah, well, let me preface it like this because I heard what you were saying. And, it is really deep because the families were broken up. A lot of people did go up north and they lost their connections to their people in the South. And they, like you said, they got into the urban living and the urban lifestyle. And a lot of them lost their grandmama's way of doing things and things like that. And a lot of the history and knowing what your family roots really were. They lost that. And so a lot of people are looking for that. And that's really heavy. And it is really important to look at these historical markers. Here in Tuskegee, Alabama, there are several around town that we have like that. And these are good places to start because like when you said, if this brother has folks that lived in that community during that time period, they can look at the prominent citizens and where they went to church. A lot of the people would gather around these people and they would be influenced by what they had to say. So that is a good way to start. And a lot of times you can go to the local newspapers and they have archives if the paper was around that long. Now, the key, why do you look for these prominent citizens? It's because of what we call the zeitgeist, what was going on during that time period. And this was a time period when Jim Crow was really big right after slavery. But even before slavery was ended, people like Frederick Douglass were going around and advocating for the liberation of the slaves, the abolishment of slavery. Now, I would encourage everybody, because this goes to the root of what we're going to talk about tonight. I would encourage everybody that is listening to go listen to Frederick Douglass's speech about the 4th of July. And one of the things that he says in there is, when you guys celebrate, we have to mourn. I mean, he dug into the Declaration of Independence and all that freedom movement. He said that does not apply to us. He really laid it out there because he said as long as we are, you know, second class citizens. There's no freedom that deals with us. Now, one of the things that he always advocated are those four pillars that you just described. And there's a reason why he advocated this. And those four pillars are this, Gary: respect for life, respect for the Constitution, personal responsibility, and limited government. Now let's look at that again, okay? When you say respect for life, most of our people are not into murder and killing folks. They just don't, they're not about that. We're all about life. We're spirit people. So we're not about death and dismemberment and all that kind of stuff. Second of all, respect for the Constitution. Yeah, the Constitution was made by our people, and they plagiarized it and used it for their own purposes. And there's a lot of evidence of that too. So we do respect the Constitution and the rule of law. Most of us are not out there trying to be scofflaws and lawbreakers. All of that is part of the system that they created to make us outlaws. We're not that by nature. Number three, personal responsibility. Everybody wants to take care of their family. Who wants to just be laid up sorry, depending on the government? Most of us do not want that. We want to go and get ours, and not just a little bit, the minimal. We want the most. We want to do this. And limited government. Get out of our way. Stop giving us all these regulations and rules about why we can't do something and barriers to entry into certain industries and businesses. Get out of the way, government. Just let us do our thing because we're industrious people. We built this country. So, I mean, all of that makes sense. Now, so when we talk about this, we talk about these communities like where this brother was. And you have to think about other communities. The most prominent one would be Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Booker T. Washington called it the Black Wall Street. Now, he gave it that name, and it stuck ever since then. But you have to think about the Greenwood community in Tuskegee, Rosewood down in Florida, and so many other cities like that. In fact, Booker T. Washington was responsible for, I think it's Eatonville, Florida, Mound Bio, Mississippi, Grambling down in Louisiana, and Tuskegee Institute. Now, a lot of people don't know this. This is important. And when we talk about prominent citizens and people to look for when you're looking for your loved ones and your roots, Booker Washington really lived by those four principles that were laid out by Frederick Douglass. There were a lot of communities that took that to heart. And that's because that was a selling point to sell to white America. Look, you let these brothers do this, they will not be a burden to you. And essentially, if you don't do this, they will be a burden to you because you're going to have to take care of them. He said, set them free and give them all the tools that they need to do what they need to do. And they did that. And that's how Tulsa got built. That's how Tuskegee got built. Booker T said, okay, we're going to build a city inside of a city. Now, when you look at these other cities that Booker T influenced, there were a couple. I didn't even realize this till very recently. I think one of them was Mound Bayou, and I think another one was Eatonville, where these cities were incorporated back in the 1800s as all Black cities, all melanated cities from the beginning. They never had white authorities there. That's what I'm saying. There are several places like that. But because Tuskegee was already a city populated by white folks, Booker formed his own city called Tuskegee Institute, which still exists to this day. It has uh, 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 a separate zip code, all of this. It's its own place, and it took that self-reliance thing to the next level. They had their own laundry, electrical service, and heating systems, water systems. They had it all. They had their postal system. They had everything as a separate incorporated entity inside of another city. So that utilizes that principle of self-reliance. Okay, limited government on the grounds of Tuskegee University, which was Tuskegee Institute back in the day. They had their own law enforcement and all that kind of stuff. They took care of their own. That was what the whole thing was. Respect for the Constitution. They honored that because that is what when they really enforced certain parts of the Constitution, it made everything better for everybody. When they actually enforced, when they pushed those issues. So communities like that, where Brockington was in North Carolina, those places were the places where you look for your ancestors. You look for those prominent folks, just like you can come down to Tuskegee and look for your folks, or Eatonville, or any of the Mound Bayou, any of these other places. You can go down there and you go to those communities and you can find the folks that you're looking for. And there's another one that's really deep. Down in southern Alabama, there's one called Africa Town. And it was founded by the people that had the last slave ship. Now, when you're looking for your roots, if you find your roots down there, that's really heavy because these people, okay, now, Carrie, you're going to love this story. You've heard the story of the Clotilda. I stood up to the historian when he made this point about, oh yes, this was the last slave ship that went to Africa. And I confronted him. I said, that is a schooner. The picture on that they were showing was a schooner. I said, those don't fly out, they don't sail outside of 100 miles from the coast. And so he went into this elaborate story about how they retrofitted it with an extra ballast, and they went and essentially kidnapped some African folks and brought them over here. This was after slavery was ended. It was some bet that they had with each other. Now they call that the last slave ship. Well, that was a kidnapping voyage right there. They brought these people here. They were enslaved for like 5 years. They still had their original language. You don't see that all over the country. You see people with their indigenous roots right here. Most of us are from right here. So your search for your ancestors are all of those records. A lot of them have been destroyed because even here in Tuskegee, the prominent newspaper that would have kept a lot of the records of my great grandfather who founded Tuskegee were burned up. Very few pictures, very few news articles, and a lot of the historic stuff is gone. The university didn't have a whole lot of that stuff. We've gone up there to their archives too. But that's something that you have to remain diligent about when you're looking for your roots. People come down here all the time from the north or other parts of the country and don't realize how treacherous things were here because they were, like you said, they were up there in New York pot locking and didn't realize how deep it was down here until they get down here and see that vestiges of that still exist. Jim Crow still exists down here in Alabama. In fact, the last show that we did was about the Jim Crow voting system down here in Alabama. So yeah, it's really deep. So I don't celebrate Independence Day. I've said all that to say I don't celebrate Independence Day. I celebrate the 4th of July because that was the day that Tuskegee Normal and Industrial School opened its doors for the first time. And the first students walked into that class. And that was my great, great, great grandfather that did that. And then his daughter, Virginia Adams, my grandmother's grandmother, was the first graduate of Tuskegee. So I celebrate that heavily. And these are things that we have to celebrate. The birth of HBCUs and the birth of all of this progress for the people to get their education and move forward. And Tuskegee Normal School was originally developed as a school to teach teachers. When Booker T got there, yeah, they taught some teachers, but then they taught the people all these industrial arts as well as the academic arts. So they were very well rounded in their educations. So that's something that we definitely celebrate. And on our channel, we have that up there. We did a celebration today. And people can go to Tuskegee Virtual on YouTube and Tuskegee Virtual on Facebook and see the story of Booker T and Lewis Adams. Now, see, they both have roots here. And if you go and look at the historical markers, you would see the names of these other peoples. And when you look at the last name, that might be somebody that you're related to. Like Booker T had three different wives, and they had families. And so they had their maiden names. So all of them could have been related to somebody that you know. You've got to do the research and get close and just hone in on what you're looking for, because when they say we have a stolen legacy, that is for real, Carrie. That's for real. Seriously.
So with those four pillars that you talk about, how could those be implemented today?
Well, first of all, you got to remember what has happened in the political structure since we were doing that back in the day. We've had a reversal, a shift in the polls, because our people back then under Frederick Douglass, we were conservative Republicans. And if you realize what that means those four pillars. And when the white people saw how wealthy and prominent and how successful we were becoming with those four pillars, they vowed to make conservative Republican a dirty word in melanated people's mouth. And guess what? They succeeded. Because most people, when you hear that now, most of our melanated folks, if you say conservative Republican, they're instantly disgusted. They make a face. But that was the ideology that enriched our people to an extremely high level. And they couldn't be having that, especially when you look at our birth rate. They knew that we were going to outpopulate them in a short order of time. They knew the numbers. So when you talk about using those pillars today, we have to update that to the modern understanding. And if you look at each of those pillars, they can be applied to what's happening today. And when you talk about respect for life, our people need to stop killing each other. That's crazy. It's ludicrous. It's stupid. Okay, we need to stop killing each other in these senseless crimes. There's a bigger enemy. If you want to go up against somebody and do some damage, there are bigger fish to fry. And I'm not advocating violence against anybody, but we don't need to be doing any damn injuries and murder of each other. That's first of all. Respect life, bro. Just respect life, people. Respect for the Constitution. Now that is really close to my heart. And I have a lot of friends that would really admonish me if I did not say this on your show, Carrie. Everybody listening to this show needs to get a copy of the United States Constitution and read it, because the Constitution is where they lay out these different the different guidelines on how to be in the United States and in America, basically. And they protect everybody. They didn't write it for us, but it protects everybody at this point. So you have to look at that and learn that, because when they start to violate your rights, you have to know what your rights are first. So that's number two. Respect the Constitution, but know it, inform yourself about it. Personal responsibility. That's another one. This gets political too. It's like, stop asking the government to solve all your problems. Get just get it together. Take, people, everybody needs to just get a grip and understand that if you really focus on something, you can accomplish it. People want to blame the white folks for this and blame the white folks for that. They do put a lot of obstacles in front of us, but we're the strongest people on the planet, and this is our actual land. So we are on native territory. There's no reason why we should be prospering at the height of everything. So self-reliance is what it's all about. Let's grow our own food. Let's educate our own people. Let's stop looking at the public schools to babysit our children during the day and really take some responsibility, some personal responsibility for our own children. And that way we can keep them out of trouble, a lot of trouble. Okay. The last one is limited government. All of us want limited government. We don't want to keep paying all this fees for this, a tax for that, and they're gonna, charge us for this and charge you for that. Get out of the way, government. Let us do what we need to do. That's how we can use these four pillars today. And I encourage everybody to get the Constitution and then think about what we're saying with those four pillars. And I'm not encouraging anybody to be Republican or Democrat because neither one of us, and now, Carrie, you and I have had this conversation so many times. Neither one of these parties give a crap about us. They don't give a rat's ass. The Democrats, we are just voting fodder for them. They just want us to vote for them in mass numbers. That's all they want. Republicans, they just want us to, go away or die or something, whatever. The point is, we have got to stand for ourselves and be self-reliant. That's the main thing right now. That's the most important thing is our own self-reliance, especially with the economy collapsing and all these rumors of wars and rumors of wars. It's time for us to buckle down and really get a grip on what we're doing. And that means reconnecting with our loved ones, learning what our ancestors were doing, finding out where our property is. Because there's a lot of people like this young man, this brother right here, is looking for these folks in Carolina. They might have land that's been abandoned. They don't know what's going on up there. But all of that they did intentionally because they did not want us to know these things. That's how they kept it out of our eyes. We've got to find our people by any means necessary. And we've got to do what we've got to do to make sure that the young people understand the value and the importance of the legacy that our ancestors left for us. We got to do it. Yep.
Yo, man, thank you. I mean, and what I want to show with what you were saying is this: whatever is put out against us, if we take that shit in and hold it and just hug it and never let it go, we got to change what we get. And so that's what I'm trying to do here. Just because they celebrate the 4th of July for killing you off doesn't mean you have to look at it the same way. So, like Patrick was saying, he looks at the 4th of July a whole different way because these cats built a institution where they could teach the people who are outside, like we're still outside the mainstream now. These people were teaching people who were on the outside of the mainstream how to fend for themselves. That's pretty kick ass to me. Teaching and one of the things about Tuskegee that Patrick taught me was they built their own bricks to build their own schools. Now, this was over 100 years ago. Ask yourself this question: could we do that now? Go from San Diego to Maine, go from Miami to Seattle. Are any so-called African Americans, are we doing that or teaching that? With all the education we got, with all the money we got, with all this stuff we done got from somebody else, because that's how we use our energy to make sure other people live well on your land. So man, I think those four pillars are extremely important. And man, I appreciate you sharing it with us.
Hey, no problem, brother. It's all about the upliftment of our people and lifting the veil of ignorance off of our folks. That's how Booker T put it. Lifting the veil of ignorance. We got to do that. And I think it's really important what you were talking about earlier about finding our ancestors because we have to know our history. We have to know where we came from. We've got to know, because people that don't know their history, they're just kind of flopping around, and when we learn our rights, and I don't mean our rights as so-called African Americans, because that's bullshit. Of course, you know that. But I'm talking about our rights as actual indigenous people. You know what I mean? We have
Yes.
to learn that. We have to understand that the majority of us are not from Africa. We're not from there. It's just a handful, but they're very few and far between. They want to put that label on us to diminish us, because that's not a nationality. That's bull crap. And that's what I'm saying. We got to learn our history. So when you look for your people, look for their successes, but understand that their successes are taking place on our land, on their own land, our native land. This is why they're doing what they do, because they know that this is our native land. They know that this is our home turf. This is why they want to co-opt all the stuff that we do. This is why they want to name their sports teams after us, because they know the strength that we have, man. They know the strength that we have as a people. So when we broke through that little barrier to start our HBCUs, and especially Tuskegee, countering the 4th of July, like, nah, forget your 4th of July, your Independence Day. Nah, this is something to celebrate.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What do you think about the HBCUs of today?
Wow. Deep that you asked that. HBCUs of today, interesting dynamic that they have with Tuskegee University. Many of the other HBCUs kind of turn their back on Tuskegee, because Tuskegee in the Deep South started out with industrial training and life training before they started with the academics. A lot of the people, including what's his name, Du Bois, had a problem with Booker T because they wanted him to teach Latin and all these, fanciful things. And Booker Washington had the best comeback for that. And here's the thing. He says, why should we start out teaching lawyers and doctors when white folks are not going to use doctors and lawyers that are melanated? We need to teach our people how to be construction workers, farmers, seamstresses. We need to teach them how to do all these arts so that they can go out and make money so they could pay for these doctors and lawyers that are black. He said, we need both. We need all of this. If we just have a bunch of black doctors and lawyers, where are they going to make their money? You got
Yeah.
to teach the general population. So a lot of these other HBCUs turn their back on Tuskegee, and that you don't see Tuskegee recognized as much. But I feel like Tuskegee has offered a much broader spectrum of education over the generations, much broader spectrum. Now, just like you said, they taught these brothers how to make bricks. They taught them how to build structures. They taught them how to grow their own crops and raise their own livestock. They taught them these things that were vital, where they were just working for somebody else before. Now we're showing you how to do this for yourself, which is vitally important during that time period. Because otherwise, you went into the sharecropping business and you just worked for the white man. But you come and get educated and learn how to make bricks. And see, that was something that Lewis Adams really pushed heavily, my great grandfather. Lewis Adams pushed the trades because he was like doing tinsmithing and mechanic work and all these other harness making, shoe making. These are things that everybody needs, not just white folks, not just black folks. He had a huge business doing it. There's certain trades that they don't care what what color you are, they just need it done. construction, making bricks. These things are practical, you know? And so those things were very important that our people could go out and do this and learn these things. So a lot of the other HBCUs, they started out on the academic trail, started out teaching Latin and all these other things. And they kind of badmouthed Tuskegee for doing this focus on the vocations. I personally I'm proud of it because they did both. Now they're doing aerospace. Heck, the Tuskegee Airmen came from here. They were all students at Tuskegee. Most of all of them were either graduates or students. They went to school at Tuskegee and they studied at they studied flying at Moton Field. So yeah, we you know we have a fairly decent relationship in terms of the ones in the South. Morehouse and some of these other schools, we play them and we kick their butts in football most of the time. but but in terms of the history, they don't see us the same because they were all into uh, uh, they were all into the academics way more than the vocations, whereas we down here were into both.
So let me ask you this. With what's going on in the world today, the gentrification that's going on in all these major cities where most of the people fled to, what's going on in these cities now with the incoming immigrants coming in? How do you think that education or doing things would play out today?
Well, you look at the trends of today, and a lot of our people are moving out of the cities. The cities have become extra chaotic. You look at Chicago and some of the political things and some of the activities on the street. It's just getting ridiculous. So a lot of people are leaving these gentrified areas because that's what happens. Atlanta is a really good example of that. I hadn't been to it. When I was living out in California, I hadn't been to Atlanta in years and years and years. And so when I moved back here a few years ago, first time I went to Atlanta to just visit folks, and I went to West End, Atlanta, which was the cultural part of Atlanta. This is where you had a lot of the Rastas, a lot of the Jamaicans, Africans, all these cultural folks were there. All these shops with our people doing stuff. That it was their Black Wall Street in Atlanta. One of them. They had that one in Sweet Auburn. Well, I went to West End to just look for some stuff that was familiar to me. And they have heavily gentrified it. Most of the people can't even afford to live there anymore. And so they're being pushed into other areas. And that's sad because a lot of these places are historical. You know, in the West End, there were so many private homes. There were like, prominent people grew up in these homes. All these homes have been destroyed and torn down now, and they've got high rises there, in places that are, too expensive. So a lot of people want to get back to the roots, and I applaud that. And I see so many people coming back to Tuskegee, and they're looking to get a piece of land out in the country somewhere, and that's beautiful because they want to grow their own food. They want to take care of their own situation without having to worry about being dependent on the government. Because let me tell you, a lot of people that are listening to the show here tonight need to understand that things are coming to a head, and this European dominated society and their way of governing and their way of economics, it's on its way to collapse. And they'll tell you that themselves. They know it. They're aware of it. That's why they're stockpiling food and ammo. So, we don't need to be stupid. We need to be prepared. And that's how I feel about the cities. The cities are cesspools now. You got all this craziness going on, people shooting, and mass shootings going on all over the place in these cities now. Smaller cities are starting to have just mass shootings. So yeah, and a lot of this is pre-planned because they want to instigate and start this going. And that might be for another conversation, but yeah, it does get really heavy, and it's good that people are moving out of these cities and coming back to their roots. And when they come back, and this is another reason why so many people are looking for their family members, like this brother in Carolina. They want to find their roots. They're like, okay, I'm tired of pop locking. Let's go back to where we came from and see what's going on there. Find out what grandma and granddad left. And is it something that I can claim? Is it some land? Is it anything that I can come back and look for? Even if it's just the history of our family. And maybe I can find some cousins that I didn't know about. People are looking for that. People are waking up to the big lie that's been pulled over our heads for so many years. They're conscious of it now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, cool,
So
Patrick. Man, I really appreciate that share you did, man, because it gives people, another another way you can look at yourself.
yeah,
Just don't look outside of yourself. Look into yourself because there's a whole bunch of people you're connected to. What they call that sixth degree of education. I may not know it, but you may know it, or your wife may know it, but so it can still be gotten to. And so when we look at our families like that, you are a part of something bigger. Just look at yourself as a leaf on a tree. You want to compare. You're
yep.
connected to that many people. So, brother, I just want to say thank you for sharing that with us tonight. And thanks for sharing your time with me tonight.
Anytime, my friend. Anytime.
Cool, man. Well, look, you have a good night and we're going to chat soon.
We definitely will, my friend. Look forward to hearing from you.
All right, brother. Have a good night.
Peace out.
So, listen, I wanted to point out this. I wanted him to share that story with you because, so when you think about, cities where a lot of our people, a lot of our ancestors were doing things, uh, he's in one of the cities. He's directly connected to one of the brothers that was making stuff happen. A lot of our families was doing that, helping him. I mean, just say if your people were from Alabama, you could have been some of the students. Your people could have been some of the students in the brick making class, how they were showing these cats how to do bricks. So you have that in you. You have that spirit in you. And it's not just making, I mean, the land is so vast here in the South, people were doing all kind of stuff. Your people may have been connected or into that industry. You have that in you. So like he was saying where they was going on to teach Latin and all this other coon stuff, as you can see, most of us got into that stuff. Don't mean nothing. Can't do nothing with it. But there were people, those unnamed people, that's you all day long. I know a lot of y'all from Africa and all that. Go find your folks over there. I mean, if you say that's where you are, your mama needs you. Go home and help her. Like we trying to do to our mother and all our families here. So I want to thank you guys for joining me tonight. And we're gonna get down later on in the week. Oh, I'm gonna say this one more time. Went to see George Clinton last night. Oh my God. If you can go see these brothers and sisters who put out music that was some cool shit back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and you see these people, they they may be 85 years old, but when you see what they do and what they've done and how they've mastered their craft, you're gonna swear to God, you see a 25-year-old up there on the stage. If you get a chance to go see George Clinton anytime, He's going to be all over the country for the next few months. If you get a chance to go see him, check him out. So we'll catch up with everybody a little later on in the weekend, it's Monday, a little later on in the week. You guys have a good night. Peace out.